Hello, hello, hello again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone in between. We have arrived at another episode of Metal Gear Monday's Revengeance. This week, we are featuring Ryan Payton once again, who has so graciously come back to talk to me about all things portable ops. He has some behind the scenes scoops to give us, and just in general, a very nice conversation is in store for you. So, we hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, Ryan Payton. So, Ryan, how have you been since we last spoke?
Well, I've been busy as always, working on the stuff that we do over at Camouflage. Had a good holiday, settling into the new normal that we're all living through right now with the pandemic, and uh,
Sure.
yeah, just really excited to be here, Tori, to be able to talk to you more about my history working on portable ops and all things Metal Gear.
Excellent. Yeah, we've had a great fun time recording these episodes so far, and it sounds like our listeners are really responding well to it. So that leads me to believe that this conversation we're about to have is going to be a pretty fun one. Not to mention all of the fun teasers you had from the last time you talked with us on the show.
That's right.
So I guess I'm just going to open it up to you about one of the things you mentioned last time, and specifically regarding the story of Portable Ops, the name, if you want to start there.
Yeah, that's right. So uh, I don't know if I've ever talked about this publicly, so that's what's kind of fun about it. Is I think last episode I talked about some of the internal thinking on the name, and one thing that is funny about the way that Hideo works is you could tell with a lot of the different aspects of Metal Gear that there's different influences that are behind different naming and designs and all that, and with MPO or Metal Gear Portable Ops, like that was no different. And we had some ideas, and I also want to be respectful of him and not reveal everything, so I won't go into some of like the creative inspirations behind the name, but I will say that there was actually something of an issue with naming the game Portable Ops, because it's a there were some complications behind naming a PSP or a PlayStation Portable title with like portable in the name. Now there are
Uh,
other examples of it, like Monster Hunter Portable, but it kind of results in like market confusion, and there's different policies about it per territory. But that was one
sure.
area where Hideo was able to use his muscle, working with executives to push that thing through. And I would love to get into more details, but I guess I'll stop at that. But that was something of a controversy, is that we didn't really internal controversy. We didn't know what the name of the game was going to be for a while, and in fact, I was looking through my notes because I was asked to come up with alternative titles in the event that we weren't able to use the name Portable Ops. And I can't remember what the names were off the top of my head, but a lot of it had to do with the origins of Foxhound and things like that. And but
Okay.
yeah, it was. I remember that was a very stressful time because we didn't know what the name of the game was going to be, and we needed to announce the game at E3. And I think in 2000, what year would that have been? In 2005 or no 2006, yeah, E3
Right.
2006. So yeah, that was, yeah, sorry I did not be able to go into too much more detail about it, but yeah, that was just like a very fun slash stressful memory from the game's development.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to ask what kind of pressure that must have been for the team to know that you're probably what days, weeks away from E3 and not completely sure what you're going to call this thing. Was that I mean, did that kind of roll over into any other aspects of producing the game, or was it kind of just isolated to that one um, problem up in the air?
I think that this was the biggest external threat to the title's development, if you will. Most of the other challenges we faced were mainly production related, just lack of time, resources, those types of things. And
Mm-hmm.
so as we talked about last episode, I'm still just absolutely floored that the team built this game in under a year. And
Mm-hmm.
what that means is that we just moved so fast, and any sort of problem at the time really felt uh, achievable, like that we could overcome almost any challenge that was thrown at us because we just had so little time to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in, like, for example, the game that I'm working on right now, we've got a healthy timeline for it, and we're doing lots of tests. We're doing lots of discussions to make sure that the path forward is the right path.
That's
And
good.
yeah, and it's really good. We're doing some very healthy pre-production. But that like that's we had pre-production on Portable Ops, which literally lasted, I think, for about 2 or 3 months, and that was it.
Oh man.
So yeah, we blew past a lot of things. And if for your listeners who are curious about game development, you can really see the benefits of having proper pre-production and having a much larger team and having even like much more senior people on the team. What they would do with a Metal Gear game, which you can see obviously with Peace Walker, same
Mm-hmm.
hardware, but drastically different quality, visual quality. Not to say that Portable Ops doesn't look good. It actually, comparatively to most titles that were released in 2006 on PSP, it's definitely one of the better looking games.
Oh
But
yes.
it's incredible what the team achieved when they had proper pre-production, like you saw on Peace Walker.
Right. Yeah, and that's you mentioned some game mechanics, which I'd love to touch on later. So one last question about just portable ops story in general, and fine again if your answer is the same
Mm-hmm.
way. I can just move on. But how much did you know about the story of portable ops while you were working on it? Did you have specific details about any of these characters or their plot lines, or was it more just kind of the technical end of things for you?
Well, for better for worse, I was intimately familiar with the story quite early on because I had a lot of work involved with the story. Not that I was writing anything about it, although I would give feedback on various elements. But
Okay.
I was in charge of ensuring that we did all the voiceover recording for the game, and so I had to get early access to the script and
Sure.
work with the
Okay.
actors, Chris Zimmerman Salter, who directed the voiceovers, um, and and did a great job with that over at Salami Studio. It was my first experience doing that, so that was wonderful. And then also working with Ashley Wood, that was one of my jobs. It was to
Oh, excellent.
help like to navigate and help lead the charge on a timeline that was extremely short.
Hmm.
And he was such a champ. And one of the things that's great about his art style is that it's very abstract and very stylistic, right? And
Hmm.
so it actually fit perfectly into a game that had absurdly short development cycle. And so he had a lot of questions about the story and what the intent was and and the motivation between these characters. And so, as much as I could, I was trying to help guide him in that process, which was really fun for me. I mean, for context, I wasn't even at Kojima Productions for a year by the
Oh,
time I was
wow.
doing a lot of this work. So, yeah, a dream come true, that's for sure.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, and you just kind of dove in head first, it seems like, which uh, in my mind, there's really no other way of doing things that are new. So it sounds like you made the best of the situation you had. And I gotta say, we're gonna touch on this a bit later, but I ended up being quite impressed by the end of my playthrough of this
Mm.
game, knowing that it was about a year of a timeline to get this made. It just, you could see the effort from the team to pull something like that together for a new system for the team, right? It just, I'm quite pleased to be here talking with you about it because I personally had a really great experience with it.
Well, it's great, and I think the and I appreciate that, and that Portable Ops is going through something of a maybe small R, like lowercase r renaissance, and a level of appreciation because I think it's well deserved for the team and what they did, and yeah, like you said, given the short amount of development time they had, and the expectations, and uh, yeah, I think they did an unbelievably good job with it. And in fact, I was in preparation for this episode, I was just kind of scouring YouTube to watch some videos about the game to familiarize myself with it. And there's a
Hmm.
couple of things I noticed. One is that wow, it's amazing what 15 years will do to your memory. It's like I forgot a lot of stuff, so that was somewhat concerning. But the second thing was I watched a video produced by a gentleman named Jay's Review, and if you haven't seen that, if you're a listener and you haven't seen that video, it's really wonderful. I think he takes a very as much as he can, an objective view on Portable Ops, and he posted it a number of years back. But I just finally had a chance to watch it. It's about a 40-minute video, and he really goes in depth about some of the really great successes of portable ops and also some of its shortcomings. I thought it was very fair, but also like very well researched, and really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, again, it's like, I think if you just search YouTube for MGS portable ops critical defense, you could find it.
Excellent. Well, that's the kind of content that at least the crew of MGMR and I think it's safe to say a handful of the audience is a fan of. Real objective and critical analysis. At least I hope to say that, because otherwise, what we're putting out is not for some.
Right. Sure.
So that's great to know that other people are giving this game attention, because I think all three of us, between Warren, Chris, and myself, agreed that this game has been slept on a little bit. And it's nice to hear that there's even if it is a lowercase r, renaissance coming forth for this game. That's really great.
Yeah, and it's got its work cut out for it, right? Because I think, as we all know, it has never been re-released, unlike a lot of unlike the majority of the Metal Gear catalog.
Right.
And that doesn't help its legacy, right? If you can only play it
Sure.
on the PlayStation Portable, and sometimes you can play it on the Vita. That's about it. And so I hope one day that the game will be made more available out wider on other platforms. That would be awesome.
Oh, that'd be so great, especially if we could get a second joystick. That would just be
Yes.
phenomenal.
It would just change the whole dynamic of the game, and for the best, right?
Right. Well, okay. If you're comfortable moving on, I think it seems like it's time to talk about the canon question. Is Portable Ops canon to, or according to canon, a viable contribution to the story?
Well, I'll preface this by, I'm going to try my best to explain my thinking on it and my opinion on it.
Okay.
Even though I think it's understandably complex for most of your listeners. So I guess maybe for a little bit of context before I go into my opinion about it, and tell me, Tori, if I'm misunderstanding this, because I actually didn't know this was a controversy until relatively recently.
Okay.
Is that I think we all understand that early on, when the game was marketed, it was marketed as a canonical entry into the Metal Gear Solid saga.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And in fact, like, I'm almost positive, because that was a big part of the messaging and the work that I did. In fact, as part of our show notes, I copy and pasted a photo I took out of my old notebook from 2006, in which I was charged with trying to think about how we're going to message this out to the world through marketing and PR and other avenues. And my 4 bullet points about the title was, finally Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation Portable. It's not Acid. No offense to that awesome franchise, right? But it's Metal Gear Solid on PSP. And then there's these bullet points. And then the second big thing about the game is you can recruit comrades. And then another big point about the game is that it's online. You can play multiplayer, which was really cool. But the fourth big point was that it was the missing link in the Metal Gear canon. So if this was not a canonical game, then why would we talk ad nauseum about how the game is actually a missing link in that Metal Gear Saga story, right?
Sure.
So that being said, though, from what I understand, because I when I left Konami and Kojima Productions back in 2008, I just moved forward. I tried not to look back too much.
Sure.
But I tried to, I heard certain things, and I was obvious, and I played Peace Walker. I really loved it. I played Metal Gear Solid 5, and I really loved it. But one thing I saw this kind of brewing controversy was about how some things were conflicting. Some story from other titles, like the future titles, were conflicting with some of the things that were depicted in Portable Ops. And then there was this interview that I was linked to where Hideo was interviewed and talked about, he was asked specifically whether or not, I think it was from Jeff Keighley, whether or not Portable Ops was actually a canonical entry in the franchise. And I think he gave an answer, from what I understand in Japanese, was it's canon in some regards, but it's when I get involved with a title and I get involved in like a part of the canon, and and by I mean he like Hideo Kojima, like if I start to change things around or suggest different things that happened, that's okay because that's part of this process, and that's me putting my Hideo Kojima, directed by Hideo Kojima, like brand on this.
Hmm.
So, and I think that from what I can tell, that's exactly what happened. Is that
Okay.
um, he was involved in the initial planning of Portable Ops. In fact, I think he even has a story credit on the game. And we sent him the scripts, and he was aware of what was going on, and a lot of the ideas came from him. Um, but he didn't direct the game. And so when he gets it,
Oh,
and when
okay.
he directs the game, like he did with Peace Walker, I would be doing the same thing that he did, which is when he's writing the story for Peace Walker or he's writing the story for Metal Gear Solid 5 and something comes up that contradicts Portable Ops, I think what I'm assuming, this is where my I'm just assuming my assumptions are, is that he's like, well, that's Portable Ops, but this is a Hideo Kojima game. And if I need to change things or if I need to contradict things, I will for the sake of the game that I want to direct.
Sure.
And so be it. So that's, I think what he's trying to say is like, there are aspects of Portable Ops that are canon and that there's aspects that contradict. And when it contradicts, look to the games that are directed by me that have my name on the front of the package. And I think that's
Okay.
more or less what he was trying to say when I read that interview, and it makes sense to me.
Yes, it's what a wonderfully Kojima answer to that question. It seems to fit.
Right, I think it does, but I understand that this is a very controversial topic and important for many. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Tori, is that many years ago when this was uh, more of a fresh topic, I was watching a Twitch stream of a really well known player and streamer of Metal Gear games. I believe his name was Outer Heaven, and he was playing Portable Ops. And there's this question of canon. And I think he had said at one point, he's like, "Well, it's not canon." I think he had that perspective. And I was like
Hmm.
in the Twitch chat, and I was like, "Well, actually, as somebody who worked on it, like it was canon, or in some regards, it's canon, but it's such a nuanced thing. The thing I just described is very nuanced." And so I was like in the Twitch chat, and he was like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, oh, I don't even want to get involved. And it was so hard to have like a discussion with me in the Twitch chat, and I'm thinking like, what am I even doing in here? Like,
Sure.
and so it was kind of a sad moment. And when I don't think I did a very good job of explaining like the nuance. So I feel happy that we have this opportunity to be able to speak about it on the show, and for the record, I understand where he was coming from too, because it's a very confusing and seemingly uh, like definitive answer in some regards from what Hideo offered, right, about the canon. And
Sure.
it's a fun topic, but one that maybe best left at that.
Sure. Yeah. It's one of those that I'm sure will continue to go down in the middle ground. I'm
Yes.
sure you'll have just as many people pulling for yes, it's canon as there will be people who are naysayers. So,
Hmm.
such is the experience of Metal Gear fandom, I believe.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I know that we already probably belabored this topic too much, but I guess one thing I'd like to add, or one thing that I think is really tricky, and my team will struggle from it from time to time, is this idea of nuance, right? Is somewhere where it
Sure.
lies in the middle. And I'm always I'm often joking with my staff that I'm like the chief nuance officer of the title of the company, because I think humans in general really strive to have a very clear answer to something. But I think oftentimes where life it falls somewhere in the middle,
Hmm.
and you'd like to think that something as simple as is this game canon or not could be a very simple question, yes or no. But yeah, like you said, sometimes when you're working with a Hideo Kojima product, it's not that simple.
Right. Yeah. I think as a fan, up to the point of Metal Gear Solid 2, even, you're like, okay, well, the rules aren't what I thought they were. And I guess if I'm going to continue to be a fan of this, I'm going to have to let go of my notion of what definitely is and what definitely isn't.
You reminded me of a fun exercise that I was able to participate in my final year at Kojima Productions, and that was to work on the digital graphic novel of Metal Gear Solid 2.
Oh, excellent.
And that was based on the IDW published Metal Gear Solid comic book series that was with art from Ashley Wood, and really fun project. And that was a really tricky project for the writing team, for Chris in particular, because he had to retell the story of Metal Gear Solid 2, which is extremely convoluted over the course of how many comics, right? Maybe 12 comics or something. And as we all know, as fans of that game, it is extremely convoluted and can contradict itself and contradict things from the past. So he did his best to interpret it in the way that made sense, right? But that's not necessarily what like the art of the Metal Gear Solid 2 is all about. In fact, like part of its charm is that some of it, the elements just don't make sense. And so I think what Chris and Ashley ended up doing, and then we realized in full animated form via the digital graphic novel on PSP is an interpretation of it, if like it all kind of quote unquote made sense, right? Which was pretty fun to do.
Sure, yeah. Well, that's really cool. I suppose you could probably, with enough time and evidence, bring that question to almost any of the games, except for maybe Snake Eater, which is kind of the launching off point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe the most cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely the most cohesive, sure. In any case, I do think, not that anybody is asking for my opinion, but I would love to posit that I would like for it to be canon. I really can't have an opinion on this because I don't know how it aligns or how it relates to Metal Gear Solid 5. I can really only see the progression from Portable Ops to Peace Walker because these are the two that I've played at this point, or at least played enough of. I've just kind of dipped my toes into Metal Gear Solid 5, so I don't, I can't say at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I'd like it to be canon because I enjoyed the story enough, and I think it's a story that ought to be experienced by more players.
Yeah, I agree, but obviously I'm like the most biased person that you've talked to about this subject. So, yeah, I think and at the end of the day, like the truth of the matter is, it's if you don't want it to be canon, that's totally cool. You're not going to offend me, and it's a franchise that we all know and love, and we all have different opinions about it, and that's part of the fun. The fact that like there's a canon controversy about a Metal Gear game is kind of fun.
I agree. It's very indicative of the audience of the Metal Gear franchise, I believe,
absolutely.
Which is fun. So the next topic on my notes, again, after listening to kind of what we hoped to talk about from last time, Portable Ops Plus Subsistence, if this got to be a thing. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, Ryan.
Well, I wish it was a thing. I wish that there was as opposed to what we got, obviously, with Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops Plus, right? If we had got a subsistence version, that would have been just so fun to work on. But that team, much of that team was absorbed into the Metal Gear Solid 4 production, which desperately needed it. And if your listeners remember, Metal Gear Solid 4, even though we got a jolt of production help from that original Portable Ops team, still missed its street date by about 7 months. So that, even though I think the intentions were good, is that let's, instead of continue to build more of these PSP titles, let's focus on Metal Gear Solid 4. So anyway, but to answer your question about what a subsistence would look like, again, I went back through my old notebook, which was pretty fun, to see just, oh wow, all this different work I was doing, and I took a picture of it and I included it in the show notes. And one of the things that I saw that I was tasked with was, what would we do for something of a subsistence version? But more specifically, some of your audience members, I would assume, remember this, is that Portable Ops released later in Europe. It released, I want to say, 3 or 4 months late.
Okay.
And so it gave us an opportunity to update the game, maybe not to the level of like a subsistence or a substance director's cut type of version, but we made some enhancements to the game, if I recall. I can't remember what specific enhancement there was, but I do have my notes about some of those ideas. And so stuff that you would just, like any dum-dum could come up with. So none of this is brilliant, but additional and more interesting codec messages, because I do remember the codec being somewhat lacking. We just ran out of time, and some of the codec was pretty dry. Having more submissions, more multiplayer maps. The thing I could tell that I was really passionate about, just looking at my notes, was, can we add a lot more classes to the game of the different recruits? For example, espionage class or the medic class. Like if you have the medic in your squad, then your max HP would be increased across the board, for example. Or I'm trying to think of some of my other. Yeah, I have like some stupid idea about having like a librarian class that gives you unlimited magazines that you can use to distract guards.
I like that.
Some silly stuff like that. I also had a note that, because one of the most common critique of the game, which I know that you had as well, is just how laborious it is to drag these fallen soldiers back to your truck or to call up the codec. And so one of the ideas I had written down was, can we have a specific type of stun grenade that would just summon the people to basically do kind of a fulleton type of system, which obviously never made into the game. I had an idea for a jukebox, and like you can go into like Subsistence, you can go into like the cinematics theater and then watch all the previous cinematics. We didn't have that in the original game, and I was suggesting that as well. And then finally, we didn't have, to the best of my memory, we didn't have like a knock feature where you can like,
That's
kind of
right.
knock on the wall. And so I had a note for like, why don't we add that? So again, nothing super revelatory, but those are some of the ideas I had about if we did like an upgraded version of the game.
I like those a lot. And I think, I don't know whether when you talk about an upgraded version, I'm not sure whether you mean for PSP release or not, or I guess, would it be Vita at this point?
Well, no, it would have been PSP.
Okay.
Because the PSP still had quite a life left in it before Vita came out. In fact,
Gotcha.
I had, so just in terms of my own personal timeline, when I left in 2008, after MGS4, the team was just starting to dust off their PSP dev kits to start working on Peace Walker. So
gotcha.
it'd be a number of years before Vita would ever release. Yeah,
that makes sense. So just for a bit of context, again, that nobody asked for, but
no, go for it.
I had played Peace Walker first, and it wasn't until it was released, or I guess ported for the PlayStation 3, if that's fair to say.
That's right.
So I was coming back to Portable Ops and viewing it as, okay, so this was what got us to Peace Walker, and a lot of these cool game mechanics are being introduced here, and I understand they're not perfection. There's a shorter timeline. It's the first game of its type in the series. One thing I was curious about specifically, if this was to transcend the portable system, and I don't know if this is even worth talking about at this point, because who knows whether this could happen, but would the codec calls be similarly, would their function be the same? For example, would you be reading text, or would you opt for voice acting? Would you opt for being able to hear this message while you're sneaking, like you were able to in, I believe it's 4? Or is that 5? That must be 5.
I think in 5, yeah, they finally did that. I mean, if you're asking Tori, like if I had the opportunity to, I don't know, dust off Portable Ops and do like a proper remaster of it, with a bunch of additional content, I mean, that would be one thing I would definitely want to do, is to do real, more fully fleshed out codec with these classic characters, with fully voiced, that you can listen to while you're on the run, doing different missions. We'd also want to do like a fulleton type of system that's a lot more user friendly than what we had in Portable Ops. I think that there's a lack of environment variety. We did the best we could,
Sure.
and Peace Walker did a great job with it. But adding more environments, it would be just so much fun to work on that, because you could see they did a great job of laying the groundwork, which I think Hideo took in his own direction with Peace Walker, which I really, really loved. However, if in this theoretical world I could go return to that franchise, I'd probably go a little bit further back and kind of reach into like the Snake Eater world and align the game more with that, as of making it feel more like a proper sequel to Snake Eater, which was part of its mythos, part of its like creative DNA from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But we obviously didn't fully execute on that, given the time constraints and the PSP and the lack of resources and all the other things we've already covered.
Sure. But it was good to see that it was a goal. And, it's understandable that you can't, for a PSP game, you can't make it just like Snake Eater. A lot of that functionality will go away. But it was great to see that the design was, at least the visual aesthetics were at least kind of modeled after Snake Eater. So that was a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah. The DNA is of Sneak Eater is in that game, given that the engine was based on subsistence.
Right. Okay, Ryan. So we do have one listener question to bring up for this interview or conversation. And the question was, have you been in talks with either Kojima Productions or Konami about any future work with the series? Or if you haven't been in talks, would that be something you'd be interested in?
Well, without getting again back into the spirit of like not getting too much in the details, I did receive a very cryptic phone call many years ago about whether or not myself and the team at Camouflage would be willing to work on a something related to Metal Gear Solid, and I expressed like some tentative interest in it, even though we were very busy on another project. And I also left with this, which was, and I still believe it to this day, is that when it comes to remasters and remakes of previous Metal Gear games, I think those are fairly viable products and like worthy endeavors for the most part, because you are kind of doing the Criterion collection of something that's like a
Mm-hmm.
piece of art that's already been created, and those are a little safer, and I think that the fans would respond to those more positively, as opposed to
Sure.
being asked to create like a new entry in the Metal Gear franchise without Hideo's
Mm-hmm.
involvement, which I believe is something of a fool's errand. Because more so than most franchises out there in the world, especially the AAA ones, the Metal Gear Solid franchise to me is so interwoven to who Hideo Kojima is and his passions and his
Mm-hmm.
interests and his disinterests, that in order to create a game that feels genuine to Metal Gear Solid, you kind of have to fake being Hideo and thinking like him. And I don't think that's what fans would necessarily want. So
Sure.
that's a roundabout way of like me saying like how I responded to that question. So never heard anything of it after that. I thought it was interesting, and I was flattered to even be called up for it. But the exact details of it, I guess, will have to be saved for maybe another decade or two.
I have to imagine that that would have been flattering on the one hand. On the other, it seems like it would have been a momentous task, and the pressure would have been on. So I totally understand where you're coming from with that, and especially if you are a fan of the work you've done and the work that has come before it. I suppose I would feel nervous about wrecking it going forward. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and there's some products that I think like a portable ops that I think fans would really enjoy a remastering of that and an expansion of that, especially given the fact that it wasn't directed by Hito, right?
Hmm.
And another thing I think we talked about last episode was, I mean, I just really would love somebody to to finish the work on Metal Gear Solid 5 and have that proper
Hmm.
ending, and just look at and just do what some films have done, where the director had passed away, but they had to look at all the notes and they try to make it as authentic as possible, like that. I
Sure.
think could be a really great and worthwhile endeavor. But outside of that, yeah, I think it's going to be really tough to do something without his involvement.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we can keep our fingers crossed that one of the future projects he's got in mind is something related to that.
It would be fun.
I mean, I know he has got other things on his horizon, which
Hmm.
is very exciting. But as I understand it, Metal Gear Solid 5 remains a very contentious piece of the puzzle. So I can't really say too much more on it, given that I haven't finished the game. But um,
Well, you're in for a treat in a way. It's a brilliant game, but yeah, it's also very weird. It's very dissatisfying, I guess, in a way when you finish it and you know that it wasn't given the amount of time that was required to properly finish it.
sure, that's always a disappointing realization.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I suppose now would be the time to move into the last part that I have slated here, anyway, which is to return the favor to you and give you some of the thoughts from, at least from me, since I am the host with you here tonight. I think I could. Somewhat in general, speak on behalf of my cohorts, but we've also gotten some, I guess, positive feedback from our listeners. So, was there anything you were curious about specifically regarding how the game was perceived, or just in general?
Any and all opinions and feedback about the game is entirely welcome. For any kind of creative endeavor, at least in my opinion, it's quite strange if you don't have like a vested interest in it. It doesn't hurt a little bit when somebody gives critical feedback on something you worked so
Right.
hard on, right? But as a good friend likes to remind me from time to time, that time heals all wounds, and I think enough time has gone by that there's really nothing anybody could say to me that would like hurt my feelings about the game, and it's something I'm really proud of. And I can look at it a lot more objectively than I could back in 2006. So anything large or small that you and your audience, your cohorts wanted to offer up, I would be very curious to hear it. I'm sure your listeners would be curious to hear it as well.
Well, excellent. Yeah, that's a great place to be regarding something you've worked on creatively. And boy, do I know that it's easier said than done. So good work on getting there.
No, thank you. It only took 15 years.
Right, 15 years. So good. Well, I'll know just about how long to give the next creative endeavor that I work on. So I guess I'll just, I'll read them in order of how I've got them here. I'll start with the progression of mechanics. So going from a PlayStation 2 game to a PSP game was something that I personally, I didn't get that transition when I had first played Snake Eater. So I didn't really have opinions on it until playing this game for the show. The way I read it kind of retroactively was that I understood this was a leap to a new system and that certain things were just not going to be the same. So, having that in mind before I played it did a lot to, I don't want to say lower my expectations because, I didn't have any really to start. I tried to go in as open-minded as possible. One of the things I enjoyed and was also perplexed by was the slight improvement of the sonar monitor from Snake Eater. And this one it operates quite a bit differently. Just a little bit of background. I didn't use the sonar in Snake Eater once you get to thermal goggles and night vision goggles. There's almost no point in using that anymore. So I got by just fine, which made me rely on my tendency to ignore it in this game, which was a mistake. The sonar radar, if that is what is indeed called in portable ops, once I understood how to use it and the function that it was serving as I was navigating multiple planes of these maps, really became a reliable tool for me, and I was very appreciative of it. So I don't know if you remember very much how that worked, but
yeah, I remember. Yeah, and it was a mechanic, if memory serves me correctly, is to help players get situational awareness and get a sense for where the enemies are, given the fact that we're not handing them too many other tools to be able to determine where the enemies are. So, for example,
Right.
in MGS5, you can ping the enemies through your binoculars, and then those pings kind of stay on top of the enemies throughout the game. And that's all very clever and more modern, right? But and then with MGS4, in fact, we had, I forgot the name of the mechanic now, which is irritating, but we had this kind of sonar ring around Snake that had like this kind of, it was a three-dimensional ring around Snake that gave the players a kind of, again, that kind of positional feedback about where different sounds were happening, and it was quite clever. And so yeah, we had that feature for portable ops, and it's essential. There's a reason why it's stuck to the screen, is because we really are trying to provide a great tool for the players, so they're not surprised, they're not frustrated too much, but they're also not given exact feedback in terms of the positions of the different enemies, because we wanted to still be somewhat nuanced and somewhat suggestive. So there is still some challenge in the game.
Right. It was something I learned to appreciate. Like I said, I wholly ignored it starting out, and very quickly realized, no, this is useful. I am bad at sneaking without this. So
right. I will say, like, one final note about that feature, Tori, is that it was a feature that was there early on in the game. Visually, it didn't change at all, I think, until up until ship. And it was an area of the game that if we had more time, I would love to have look a little more visually interesting. And I always looked at that as a placeholder thing that we just never got around to updating.
Sure. Well, and I think even for what it was more, what's the word I'm looking for? It was more useful than I would have thought, given that it showed two different colors, and with enough experience using it, you could parse out what you were experiencing based off of which color was showing up and the position of that, and whether you were on a lower level and there was nobody there, it must have been at a higher level, or
Right,
what
right.
have you. It, like the dragging of the soldiers to the truck, I found that with time and experience, it made sense for this game. Again, it seemed to me, it read to me, whether this was the intent or not, that portable ops was, in another way, very much the missing link. It introduces the recruiting soldiers mechanic. Imperfect as it is, it's an introduction of it and a chance for it to be improved upon in Peace Walker. And I feel the same about that sonar radar.
Well, I agree, and I think one additional element that you reminded me of is that, and I don't know if you noticed this, because if you had a chance to put the Acid games that predate Portable Ops, is that the Acid games have a much more of a poppy look to them, like more
Mm-hmm.
bold colors, primary colors, and things like that. And it's very flashy. In fact, like a lot of the animations I think were done in Flash, funny enough, in Adobe Flash. But I bring this up because one of the things that is like a distinguishing element of the visual design of Portable Ops is that it does have these big, bold 2D, flat 2D designs. And those came from two designers, Saito-san and Hashiguchi-san, that were both really, really talented guys who worked on Acid, who then transitioned to Portable Ops. And I think they brought that kind of creative DNA to the game. So if you remember, if you look up your inventory and you have those 4 slots, they're big,
Mm-hmm.
bold icons. And also the way that the chameleon shows up on the game in the main menu, or sorry, in the main
Mm-hmm.
screen on the top left. Those are just exactly what those guys like to do in the Acid games, and they brought that kind of creative DNA into Portable Ops, which is one of the fun things about games, is that it's a creative endeavor, and each person brings their own taste to the game, no matter how hard you try to unify it all. And
Sure.
and so yeah, you just reminded me of that with like what you mentioned about the radar.
Right. Well, that's the fun thing about collaborating, isn't it? You get a much more dynamic thing than if it's just coming from one or two people's brains.
Totally, totally.
So it's it's very funny that you mentioned how nice and bold those slots are for your loadout, because I'm not going to lie to you, Ryan. It took me probably 3/4 of the game to figure out how to change my loadout.
uh,
Uh, Whether it was something I was just not interested in doing, or I just didn't try hard enough. Yeah, that was in some of the final moments of the game where I went, "Oh, I can and should change out my weapons here."
well, you would have been a good playtester, because with a development timeline that short, it gives you very little time to be able to identify key UX issues.
Hmm.
And I did my best. But it was a very scrappy endeavor. In fact, true story, like all the UX work that I'm aware of that went into the game was me calling friends living in Japan and asking them
Okay.
to sign NDAs and having them come into the Konami office and having them play the game over the course of a weekend. Most of the guys didn't finish the game, but I was sitting there with like a notepad writing down all the different things that people were saying about the game, what they were confused by, like asking me questions. And then it's just in the very short amount of time we had, trying to come up with solutions, very simple UX solutions to those problems. And yeah, I don't remember the inventory topic coming up. I'm not surprised to hear it, because again, we got very little coverage to do that. And I think part of the reason why we even allow players to use their codec to send recruits back to the base
Mhm.
is because of the amount of complaints that we received, from those play tests. And I was able to use that as data to back up, a lot of my asks to the team. So yeah, I definitely didn't do a good enough job, because we probably should have changed and made the loadout system a little bit more user friendly.
Well, hey, I mean, no judgments here. It was something that at the end of the day I chalked up more to my oblivion, not oblivion. What's the word I'm thinking
Oblivious,
of?
or
Yeah, just I don't always see details that many others catch. So, that one was probably more on me than anything, but yeah, that was just my struggle with coming from Snake Eater, which was, I mean, you could carry 1,001 things almost. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but going from, I don't know, what was it, but maybe about just under a dozen things, items. So items to like tools to use and weaponry, down to just four things total. That was a bit of a jump, but again, I understand. This is a portable game. You're very limited in the actual gameplay as well. The missions that you can play one at a time really change the dynamic of the game, and it, at the end of the day, I thought it added a fun new challenge for me to um, put together the correct puzzle pieces in order to complete the mission, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, it's in fact, I think it's one of the smarter design decisions that was done on the game. The UX issues aside about how you change your loadout, but limiting the each character to have four inventory slots. I was a big fan of that decision because those limitations result in interesting gameplay choices. The classic example of that is if you go back to 2001, if you go back and watch video reviews from GameSpot for Halo, or you read some of the reviews, a lot of people are talking about how ingenious it was that Bungie limited the number of weapon slots for the player down to two, because most of the first person shooters up until that point let you cycle through 8, 10, 12 different weapons.
Oh
And
wow.
so you weren't given a lot of interesting design challenges or questions to answer, which, like, what should I use in this situation? Should I pick up the shotgun, and should I also have like uh, a rocket launcher in my backpack, or should I
Mm-hmm.
have the sniper rifle? These are interesting challenges for the player to solve. But leading up to that point with Half-Life, GoldenEye, like Doom, like the list goes on. Like originally, all those weapons were all tied to all the numbers you had on the keyboard, and so that was a really
Mm-hmm.
ingenious thing that Bungie did. And so I think we took some inspiration from that for portable ops, to not allow the player to be able to carry around everything, because then you have incentive uh, to switch off and not be Snake all the time.
Was a big challenge for me, and I suppose this isn't too off topic. One of the things I did leave a little subsection here for the story, and I know it's been a while, so that's not going to be um, the clearest thing at the top of your brain. But in terms of playing as people other than Snake, as characters other than Snake, I don't know how much you remember about Jonathan, but Ryan, Jonathan was my little treasure. I I adored Jonathan and everything he represented, and if I wasn't playing as Snake, I was sure to be playing as him.
What about Jonathan? Really, like, why did you gravitate so much to Jonathan?
So Jonathan's story was that he had been stationed at this base and promised a lot of things by Gene and by I think the government in general, if I'm not mistaken. Some of those details are a little fuzzy for me, but he was so loyal and so resolute about obtaining his or achieving his mission that it really took knowing that he was speaking to Big Boss and oh my god, you are the legendary soldier. You probably aren't lying to me about what Gene is up to. And then just like that, his all of his loyalty is with Big Boss. And he not to give any incredible spoilers here, but he makes a very big sacrifice for Big Boss. And I don't know, I think he stuck with me more than most of, I don't want to call them sidekicks, but supporting characters in maybe the entire series. I just think his resolve and duty to the mission, as the boss would say.
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting, like, for a character like him that had, a relatively small presence in the story, like, really resonated with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks, just including you, Tori. So that's uh, and and Robert Atkins Downs, I think he did a great job with Jonathan. And uh,
Oh yes.
I remember the staff talking about him quite a lot. I heard a lot of like Jonasan, which is like his name in Japanese, and yeah, you're helping bring back some fun memories about. I think a lot of the staff had definitely a love for that character as well.
Oh well, that's good to know. I'm not the only one. It comes across. It comes across in the story. His is not one that I would have really thought of if it weren't for the whole role of Big Boss, I guess, as being that leader whose main priority is the mission and fighting for what he believes in versus somebody else's agenda. And I just thought Jonathan's um, position within that larger story was very effective.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I could mention a lot of this other stuff, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's worth mentioning if
Sure,
if
yeah, you're the
we're
boss.
covering it throughout the rest of the show, and certainly if if you get a chance to listen to our coverage before the next time you come on, and you want to bring up any of these story
Okay.
related things, I'd love to chat with you about them. But other than that, is there anything else that you'd like to address before we start signing off?
Well, one thing that we talked a little bit, even offline with you and your co-hosts, is that how fun it is to have people who worked on the game join the show, and so I thought, like, I really want to bring to help the show and be able to document some of these fun stories that developers of the Metal Gear franchise had. And I talked to a friend of mine and also like a coworker now. His name is Kazuma Jinochi. He was the composer for Portable Ops, Metal Gear Solid 4, for Metal Gear Rising, I believe, and a handful of other things. And who would go on to join me at Microsoft to work on Halo, and is now working with me at Camouflage in addition to other things that he does. He's the main composer on Iron Man VR, and is doing a lot of great work on our new project. So anyway, long story short, he and I chatted, and I asked him if he'd be willing to come onto your show to talk about his experiences working on the Metal Gear franchise, including Portable Ops, because we spent a lot of late nights together on that project. And he said he would be honored to do so. So if that sounds okay to you, Tori, I'd love to be able to do one more episode with you, and then bring my good friend Cosma around. And on top of that, I should mention that he's quite fluent in English, so that's going to make things a lot easier on me, and I think on you all as well. So I think that could be a lot of fun if that sounds good to you.
Ryan, forgive my familiarity, but you beautiful bastard, you have been so generous with your time and with your contributions to the show already. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for showing up so much for us, and absolutely, I would love to have that conversation. So that will be something excellent to look forward to, listeners. You heard it here.
So yeah, you're gonna have a lot more fun, and I'll do my best to. Cosmo's pretty quiet, so it's gonna be good that I'm on the show too, Tori, so I can kind of poke and prod a little bit, and we'll get hopefully some good stories out of him.
Excellent. That sounds amazing. I am greatly looking forward to that.
Good deal. Well, I'm looking forward to that as well, and just wishing you the best, and to your listeners, taking care during this crazy time, and appreciate your interest in this game that we work so hard on, and also to your listeners for all that. No matter where you fall on the canonical timeline debate, I love and appreciate all the passion that your listeners have for this franchise.
Excellent. Well, we do too. It's been a surreal year or so since I joined the show, and getting to speak with you for the second and looking forward to speaking with you for a third time has really just been the cherry on top of this whole thing. So yes, once again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you again, Ryan.
All right, look, me too. Talk soon.